Wendy Cheng. She is a multidisciplinary artist from Hong Kong, currently based in Toronto, Canada. Her studio work embodies contrasting textures and repeated patterns both on paper and with clay. Her artistic practice is an exploration of the interactions between interior spaces and exterior facades. Particularly, she's interested in how lived experiences are shaped within the confines of physical environments. Passionate about cultural arts and culture, Wendy has also worked at a public arts organization for a number of years to bring community engaged installations to life. Here is Wendy.
My name is Wendy Cheng. My pronouns are she and her. Before I begin my presentation, I just want to acknowledge that the land I'm connecting with everyone from today is the ancestral Wendat territory and the shared territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, and later Treaty 13 signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties signed with the multiple Mississaugas and the Chippewa bands. I am an immigrant from Hong Kong and therefore a settler who has and continued to benefit from the colonial violence on this land, commonly known as Canada. I acknowledge the trauma and systemic injustice Indigenous peoples experience and commit to actively unlearn the role and responsibility in the genocide, displacement, and theft of land from the Indigenous peoples across the country. Without the wisdom and nourishments from the original caretakers, I would not be able to begin my creative practice here. And I understand that this acknowledgement should not and will not be the end of my action in solidarity with Indigenous nations for freedom. Just for context, I moved to Toronto in the beginning of 2007. And so I was about 10 and a little too young to kind of understand what I wanted to do with my life, or like what I wanted to do, for the rest of my life. But I was like really sure that it had to be like something creative and something to do with my hands. And so these sketches that appear in the zine were completed when I went back in 2016. And at that time, I was in my second year of university studying illustration. I think as someone who was living in Toronto and doing like all the growing up as a teenager, when I returned back to Hong Kong, everything was like an inspiration to me. And for those of you who have been in Hong Kong, you know how like crowded it is. But like all of those, like everything was like so overwhelming and like such a like positive and emotional way for me. And I just want to document like everything. And if you like go to the next slide, there's like different views from like the exterior facets of the building or like me being inside of like those apartment buildings that can span from like 60th floor to like 100th floor, or just like documenting like my breakfast with my mom the next day at like a local cha san pen. So yeah, and you can kind of tell like by the composition that I like filled the page like edge to edge just because I was so like excited by everything that was there in the city with like a fresh perspective. And then so when I returned back to Toronto, I kind of like took that practice with me, and I focused on doing like urban sketching of like just different streetscapes with just a single color line work. I was really fascinated by just the different elements on the streets, and also being able to like fine tune my kind of like attention and focus by just focusing on what's in front of me without really getting distracted by anything else. And then my last trip back to Hong Kong was kind of in 2018. And these are the sketches that were completed during that last trip. And you can kind of tell that the composition like changed quite a bit and that like I allowed so much more room afterwards, like around the pages. And there's also like little snippets of text here and there to kind of like jot down my emotions throughout the day, but also like what kind of happened, what kind of mindset I was in. And so like all this like kind of practice was also very meditative for me just because one, I could be like alone with my like cup of coffee and just like draw away with like whatever color pencils or markers I had at the time. But also I think sometimes I don't remember exactly what happened during the trip or like what happened at that specific moment until I look back onto these sketches a couple years later. And it almost feels like a little surprise or like a gift from like the past me to like the future me that feels really comforting, especially in today's time. And then I think the next slide is probably just like another example of showing like how differently the composition changed from the beginning, where like it could span from like, I think from this page it probably spanned like a couple of days, where like on the right side it was like just me standing in front of the harbor and just drew for like 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whereas like on the left is probably like I went back and forth a couple of times just to see what kind of like elements would work with like this person standing with the stand. But also like you can probably tell from the like subway like handles at the top. So yeah, it kind of feels like a visual collage as well, just like with different drawings. And I think like I still today have the same practice where I carry a little pocket sketchbook with me wherever I go. This slide, it just shows like I think one of the most recent, or one of the last trip I went to Montreal with my partner, and instead of just focusing on like line work with like a single color or like marker, I kind of like expanded beyond my comfort zone and use like pencils, which I don't really use much, to kind of like explore more into that like exterior and exterior spaces, and like what to really leave out of the composition and of the spreads and what to include in the compositions. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like the end. I like really sped through that. I guess I want to end by saying like thank you for Kanto Cutie for the opportunity for all of us to kind of connect. I feel like it's like so needed, especially today. I also want to give a shout out to like other Cantonese zines that I know are doing great work around the world. There's one that's like based in Australia. Their name is like Jo Mut Ye, and I know they're publishing their first issue very soon. So check them out. And there's also another zine called F for Hong Kong Protest Music, where it focuses on different music that Hong Kongers have written over the years during the movement, with like different illustrations and writings, which also I think you should check out. I know they're working on the second issue, so and yeah, I think last but not least is this volunteer group that I'm with as well called We Are Hong Kongers. They're a global volunteering team who's really striving to preserve like the Hong Kong culture through different interviews and articles for people who live in Hong Kong right now, but also creatives around the world. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for talking about your process. I really love your illustrations. We're opening it up for questions. You mentioned earlier that you see these sketches as like a gift that past you is giving to future you, and I really love that metaphor. I'm wondering if you also if you ever scrapbook or journal in other ways other than these like very visual storytelling methods.
I think funny thing is that I didn't start journaling until when I went back to Hong Kong in 2018, and I realized that my sketchbook, because they're like small, that they won't fit the little notes I jot down with illustrations. So I then decided to separate my writing from the illustrations. So then that's when I kind of started having a journal, which I still keep up with journaling today. But yeah, I think nowadays I kind of like do it differently. If I like really want to have like a serious like thinking session, then I'll like journal in my like journal reserve for writing. But I will still like write here and there, depending on like what I'm doing during my day to day. If I'm like out in a park, I've been really enjoying going to this like neighborhood park that's like minutes away. Just sitting on like the top of the hill and just like drawing and people watching has been really nice. So yeah, I highly recommend it.
Another question you got is for observational sketching, sometimes there's tension between how things look and how you want things to look. How do you reconcile this? Do you try to blend both your imagination and your surroundings?
Sometimes I wonder if that's why I really like drawing buildings and streetscapes, because they don't move as much as like people do in between. And I think sometimes for example, I draw on the like streetcar and like subway a lot when it's like my style, I have to get up and move, and sometimes I'll just continue the line from before but into like a new shape or a new thing. And then when I eventually have like the page like finish. It doesn't really like I couldn't really tell that that was like kind of where I ended, other than the fact that I like used a different pencil or a different pen or something. Because I feel like the sketchbooks I have where I'm just like drawing for fun, I try to keep things really loose and really like playful. So I really don't have much like expectation going in, and I think like over the years, I've like gotten better at that as well. Whereas like before, even in the first couple of slides that you've seen, like everything are like so tight together. Like I think the first two slides, like everything feels like they have a place because like I had to fill in everything, but make sure that they have like 0.25 border around everything else. Whereas like now I'm trying to like be more loose with like overlaps and like transparency or like using different mediums. So yeah, I think I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
Would you ever combine the two, journaling and your illustrations together, possibly in a book form?
I think Adam talked about like self-publishing earlier, and I think that's like a really like good entry point to like start, I guess, like experimenting with that. I've like never tried it, so I think maybe I'll be open to it in the future, especially when I'm like drawing so much in the park that I'll be like excited to kind of like compile something that's like a field guide of like my park or something. That would be really nice or really cool. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not much of a writer. I feel like a lot of times when I write, it's really just to like think through a problem or like brain dump something, like an emotion that I'm feeling onto pages, just so that I can like feel better. It feels like I'm like flushed. But I haven't really explored the possibility of like writing for an audience that I'll totally be open to like trying out in the future. So yes, I think it'll be fun to like do that in the future.
Thank you again for talking about your process. 3 of Wendy's illustrations are in Cancer Cutie. Our next artist is Megan Suhu. She is